try that. It's never going to come out that way, and it doesn't really, unless you know me personally, you're probably not likely to know I have those interests.
Right.
But ask me something else so that I can kind of weave around here a bit more.
Well, I was going to say, and now for something completely different. So what about tomorrow?
So tomorrow is an example of this other half of my often bifurcated life.
Right.
Okay? I work a lot in commercial types of music settings, and yet, I have this other thing. So tomorrow is music. I'm interested tomorrow in talking about popular music in the United States in the 1910s.
Right.
And what that means. And I also want to try to make the case that means we're not talking about proto-jazz. We're talking, in fact, about the decade where jazz and popular music start to meet.
Right.
And that sort of allows me an opportunity to play certain pieces of music in a style that feels very archaic to our ear, because we're so used to embellishments and things that come quite a bit later than that period, in actuality.
Right.
And so it's sort of like a paring down, tearing things in. I mean, obviously, I'm not claiming that I'm a period music expert, but I mean, I know the difference between a playing style of that period and the decade after.
Right.
And so I'm trying to kind of play music in ways that is, like I said, archaic and a little bit less familiar than we might think it is.
So are you putting, given that we just said that, are you putting a specific time boundary around the music that you're playing?
Yeah, it's I mean, the pieces in question are, they're almost all situated between 1913 and 1919.
Oh, okay.
I do open with a piece from 1905, 1904-5, to sort of set the stage for what popular music of that period was coming out of, which was the theater. And
right.
So I kind of framed George M. Cohan as the originator of a kind of theater music that was becoming increasingly related to pop music of the time.
So now there's I lost track on again, going just on Damon's information. You've been in Calgary for years, right? For ages, I think.
Yeah, well, I was born here, but I've lived and worked here full time since 2014.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You listen to CKUA at all?
I have on occasion, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mentioned it specifically because I'm trying to remember. They, of course, have got some very esoteric programs, and one of their programs. See, there's one called the Old-disc Jockey, but it's a running joke. But I think he plays later. But I was listening on the weekend. I don't listen to it all the time. And this, it might be him. It might be the show called the Old-disc Jockey. Anyways, he's not kidding. He goes to the time frames you're talking about. I'm not sure how he gets recordings of some of the stuff he plays. I'm not sure I've heard stuff from the 1910s. I've certainly heard it from the 20s. So I'm fascinated, partially because of hearing that stuff and trying to imagine, what went together to build this kind of music, and then to take it back even to the previous decade, like 1905. I don't know about anybody else, but my imagination is just like what is the world even like in 1905? Are we flying? Is there a phone in the house? I don't even think there's a phone in the house, maybe. And popular music, how is it getting around? And, you were talking about this, and I thought, how much of this music is actually even played on a piano? Like, it's probably string band thing or something, or it's a musical, like you said, musical music, so it's probably a small orchestra was playing it. So how does that work about you adapting this music to how you're performing it?
Well, interestingly enough, I mean, you're obviously not wrong. However, the predominant way of music distribution during the first almost 20 years of this kind of situation, and earlier for that matter, but we'll restrict ourselves to, was sheet music.
Sheet music.
And it was for the piano.
Right.
So there exists a deluge of piano folios, right, from this period.
Right.
And it was also the predominant way in which this music was sold to potential publishers and things. And so that phrase "Tin Pan Alley,"
right,
that starts being used at the end of the the first decade of the 20th century.
Right.
So that's song pluggers doing this, and this is also the time of piano rolls.
Yes.
And so in terms of recordings, that's sort of a very analog means of doing so, but
yes,
those still exist.
Yeah.
And those, of course, you can hear those. Wax cylinders are around as a sound recording, but really, as soon as shellac discs start to come into a more prominent at the end of, say, 1908, 9, 10-ish, you get slightly better recordings, many of which you can hear. You can even go to YouTube and hear recordings from, say, 1913, 14, 15.
Oh, yeah.
Funny, though, they sound pretty warped to us because of just how lo-fi they are.
Right.
Also, I'm sure you've heard described before that they would have to arrange the orchestra completely absurdly in the room.
Oh, yeah.
In order for the horn to pick it up.
Right.
So
yeah.
You also get really bizarre kind of senses of balance. Like they're really wild to hear those old recordings. And musically, they feel kind of stiff and weird to us because they're.
Because they are.
Yeah, exactly. There's no other way to say it. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on a side note, one of the small miracles in my musical life, in about 1990, around there, within a couple of years or so, I worked at a record store in the city here, a big one, which doesn't exist anymore, and recently discovered had been a bunch of piano rolls that were actually punched out by Gershwin himself, performing.
Yeah.
You know about that, do you?
I don't know about here, but I mean certainly the Gershwin piano rolls are some of the most famous.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and so I got to hear. I mean, theoretically, I got to hear Gershwin playing, Rhapsody in Blue, which of course, and then there was all this kerfuffle because of course it wasn't like we were playing Rhapsody in Blue, so they're like, what is this? It's way too fast, but I mean it was astonishing to me because I am an audiophile, right? And so I had this sort of elite sense of music from whatever, but I mean this was, and so there was a high-end role playing machine in the store, and we could listen to this, and so. Anyway, so you're kind of doing your version of that in some degree. So given that stuff, so as you said, there's this bifurcation between these two. I mean, are these the opposite ends of what you do, or is there another end? Since we're having this conversation, do you also, I don't know, you secretly do a Beatles tribute concert once a year or something, or? You can tell me.
It's funny. No, it's how can I even articulate this quickly? It's like people in the, say, jazz or theater world where I play a lot, they think of me as being this classical person, and in the classical realm, they think of me as being this commercial and jazz player.
Right.
And in the new music world, like Vincent Ho, I used to be on the board of Land's End.
Oh, okay.
That world tends to think of me, I would say, closest. They come the closest to comprehending this weirdness because they are the community that's most used to interacting with composers.
Right.
And so I think they understand to a certain degree that there's bound to be this very messy, very contradictory kind of amalgam going on. But no, sadly, it's just those two sorts of things. I wish I had a third one.
Oh, rats! I was waiting. I thought, okay, here we go. And and secretly, no, but it didn't happen. Okay, just
that's right.
just a sec here. I'm gonna do a triple check here because I've had batteries fail me before, so I'm gonna actually stop and make sure this is still doing something, because that would be really very crabby. Let me just see here. Okay, gotta do that. Turn that. No, that's locked. That's unlocked.